Death is your permanent position, what kept you gainfully employed for millennia before you pitched squawking into the biological. I say you, speaking crudely. You were not there, not as such, and later on will once again not be there as such. This is, in fact, your vocation, not being there as such, yet being there anyway. I will insist on that. In fact, never more there than when dead, whether in the long rehearsal or the hearse. It's alive you're not quite there. Life's a leave of absence, a sabbatical from the universe. Let the other louts make themselves at home. You can't forget you're not from around here. You don't quite understand what's going on. You don't quite speak the language. You take some pictures. You lose your wallet. You get sick and wish you were home. So go home. 10th dispatch. Today I came to a wall made of black bricks. They were quite narrow and had a greasy sheen. I knew that they were people. The bricks were dead people, piled up. They were all speaking quietly to one another. The wall, which ran through me and continued in both directions as far as I could see, was humming to itself. I walked along it until it struck me that I was no longer walking, and had not been walking for some while. I was snuggling. Even the needles that had been piercing and sewing me all afternoon, in death it's always afternoon, here merely nudged me. Air was snuggling in my lungs, curling like a cat. My thoughts snuggled in my head. There was a word cozying up to my tongue. It was the word no, and it was sweeter than you can imagine. I thought I could snuggle forever and get nowhere and not notice, this being death. I panicked, I admit, and started snuggling faster. I snuggled a blue streak. I snuggled until panic snuggled into me. Finally, it occurred to me to snuggle into far away. Lazily, I stretched and coiled and nudged myself right over the horizon. Over the horizon is only a manner of speaking. Like everything here, a manner of speaking. 11th dispatch. Do I have time to finish? Objects. Here the files get a bit more fragmentary. This one starts with ellipses. Objects half buried in the sandy turf, so I thought. Then I picked one up. It was too light. It was not a half-buried object, but a half object lying on the surface. Half, but not broken or severed, a whole half. Not a broken pair of glasses, but a monocle with an earpiece. Not a broken china kitten, but half a chicken. Kitten, intact. Or half a chicken. Could be just as well. Its cleavage plane smooth and glazed with the same stylized swirls of fur as the flanks. But what makes me call it half a kitten? It's a whole of something that, okay, has no name, and I do it a disservice by reverting to a comparison that's only half apt. Of course, that's what it's like describing death. Here, half a thing is, I thought, and that was a whole thought. I thought, and that was another. I bent and picked up a front half of a kitten, one paw on a blue ball of string. I glanced back at the back half, which I had left tail up as if it were tunneling into the ground. Kind of test, I said. I bent over to examine another half cat, tail up, and found I had to wrestle it from the ground. This one appeared whole, but by now I knew better. It was half of something else entirely. I thought, and knew I didn't mean myself, but half of another word not spoken, a whole half. And then I thought, maybe that's what I always meant by I. 12th dispatch. A region of very dense punctuation. Every few feet I had to force myself through what I understood to be a semicolon, a resilient jade green hedge in which myriad tiny birds, they might have been birds, shrieked their joy. Out they hustled after I passed through, rolling after me along the ground. They didn't look like birds anymore. The next stretch was a list. Initially, there was a refreshing lack of connection between the parts. A forehead, a clutch of curtain rings in a pit in the sand, a slip of paper indicating that an erratum on page 204 could not be corrected in time for printing, etc. But before long they began to frighten me. I understood that there was no reason I should ever come to the end of them. A cross-stitched cupid, a candle stub with a wick pulled out of it, a sylvan breeze, a photonovella, a syllogism. 13th dispatch. Dark flakes falling, some large and feathery, and sashaying from side to side, others hurtling downward. I think you've seen snow. This snow was warm, however, though it too melted when touched. As it did, it said a word. I heard obedience. I heard ballpoint, tooth, countertenor. I understood that this was a person who had recently died and was naming the things of her or his, I thought his, life. The snowfall covered a great territory. I walked all day within that patient, thoughtful ending. The human snow blew in flurries around my feet, sometimes hurrying ahead of me. A small drift had nearly covered the thing. What? Sometimes it's hard to. Sound of recorded voice stammering. Downward flame. 14th dispatch. Blue and slotted. Untoward. Mouthy? Pillowlets. Dizzy little shrimp, or 15th dispatch. A little ahead of myself. That's the final dispatch in the file. Whether it's an arbitrary cutoff point or whether a setback at this juncture put an end to exploration for a while is unknown. Certainly the thanatographical efforts of the SJVS GSHMC continued and even intensified in subsequent years, as those triumphantly detailed maps produced during the 20s and 30s testify. There is one more file in the folder, Tips for Travelers. Unlike life, death does not offer the consolation of an ending. Of all the things travelers must learn to get along without, this will be the most difficult to relinquish. Thank you.